From above them, as if raining from the sky, the women begin to sing. Aklilu laughs and Kidana shouts for his men to move faster. Keep going, do not stop until we have won. Together they race for the askari, aware only of their beating hearts, their uniform pace, the battle cries that surge in violent waves from their women as they move, swift-footed and proud, through the dust-veiled air.
That was a passage from The Shadow King, the Booker Prize shortlisted book by Ethiopian-American author Maaza Mengiste, now set in Ethiopia in 1935 during Mussolini's attempted invasion. The story casts light on the women soldiers history forgot. It's been published in France this month. Welcome, Maaza. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to France 24 and also for reading us this little passage from the book.
Thank you, Marjorie. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So The Shadow King was released in 2019 originally, and it was met with huge success. It's been critically acclaimed, published in a number of countries. You were shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2020. And that very same year, there were two African women authors, yourself and Zimbabwe's Tsitsi Dangaremba. Do you think this heralds an era where more room is made for African authors?
I see this as part of a pattern. The world is taking note of what writers from Africa and the diaspora have been doing for decades. We have been there writing, often for each other. And I think now it's been exciting to see that other countries are taking notice. And also, I think due to the publishing industry developing across Africa, there's a communication on the continent too. And I find that exhilarating.
And Tsitsi Dangaremba and you both portray strong female characters. Now, France 24 actually spoke with her back in November 2020, and she told us about her arrest for participating in an anti-corruption demonstration in Harare. And we asked her why women with placards represent such a threat to the authorities.
Because it is simply a person expressing their own ideas and showing agency. ZANU-PF is a government that has really thrived on repressing any kind of dissent, any kind of debate, any kind of questioning. And so they cannot afford to allow people to be seen to do that, to express dissent in a peaceful way even, to question them and get away with it. Because by doing that, people will see that, oh, it is possible to question and to impact on the way the country is run.
Showing others it's possible to question and impact the way a country is run. Now, do you think may explain why women soldiers you portray in The Shadow King were written out of history books, perhaps?
I believe so. I think that a woman who stands up and rebels is a threat not only in her home, but also in the street where she chooses to go out. And not only in the street, but also against the state. A woman's rebellion begins in the house when she steps outside, like Tsitsi Dangaremba, I think has aptly shown with her own example when she was standing on the street with a placard. She symbolized to me a trifecta of rebellions against the home, against the street, and against the state. And for the ruling powers, a woman who does that is terrifying. And I think this is why women have often been written out of history, because what does it say about those who are ruling if you begin to note the women who are unafraid of power?
And now you spent a decade writing this novel. You spent time in Italy, you learnt the language and you rummaged through archives. Now people and many Italians are not aware of this page of history and the role Ethiopian women played on the battlefield. Can you tell us a little bit more about this period?
This is a moment that 1935, the fascists invade Ethiopia in an attempt to colonize it. It was a brutal war. It killed tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. It affected not only Ethiopians, but also Italians. When Italy was forced to leave, when Italy lost this war, it was better to ignore that loss. I've often heard from Italians who have heard even a little bit about this history in their history books, textbooks, They'll often tell me, well, we built roads, we built bridges. And this is the part of the history that textbooks will acknowledge because they don't want to acknowledge the brutality and then ultimately the defeat. This is a moment that many historians call the first real war of World War II.
You have some very wide-ranging female characters, from the young, vulnerable, yet quite strong maid, the older cook, the prestigious wife, and the high-end prostitute. Violence against women is also very present in your book, be it in a domestic sphere or a war setting or battlefield setting. Some scenes are quite tough to read, I have to admit. That said, I read that you actually rewrote the book to make it more centered around female characters. What prompted you to do so?
Thank you for that question. Well, the first draft, that draft of the book that I finished, wasn't really a very good book. I was not proud of it. It wasn't the book that I imagined I wanted to write, and it was male-centered. I was writing a story based on things that I had heard growing up, but those versions of this moment in Ethiopian history still tended to prioritize the men. And then at some point, I started discovering the women in this, and one headline after another, one article after another showed to me that they were much more central than I had initially thought. And I decided to get rid of that old draft, which was a little bit hard, I have to admit, initially. And I started again and centered women, and everything seemed to come alive after that.
Now, your book is centered around the 1930s, but fast forward to nowadays, violence against women in the Tigray region has been making headlines in recent years, and it sometimes feels like no progress is being made on that front. What are your thoughts?
There is violence against women in the Tigray region. There's violence against women in the Amhara region. There are violences against women across Ethiopia. It's also something that we have been discussing, but need to continue discussing around the world. Domestic violence is a global illness. It is a global disease. We've seen in the United States that often these shooters that move into public spaces and begin to kill strangers often have charges of domestic violence against them before they pick up the gun and go out to kill strangers. This violence perpetuates other violences, and we have to stop that in order to make all of us safe.
I'd like to move on to photography, which is also playing a big part in this story, because you've also created an online archive about the Italo-Ethiopian War called Project 3541. Let's take a little glimpse. Now, Maaza, one of your characters is a photo reporter of Jewish origin who is stuck working alongside one of Mussolini's brutal armies on the ground. And amongst other things, he takes photos of local people. What was it that drew you so much to photography?
Photography was often used as a weapon against colonized peoples. In order to subjugate a group, you had to first create a narrative that they deserved that or they needed that kind of rule, that kind of power inflicted on them. I knew that the Mussolini was aware of the power of visuals, of film, of photography, and I wanted to consider what it might have been like for a young photographer, a young soldier who is Italian but also Jewish, to be on the ground in the war in Ethiopia, making images that he feels uneasy about, but he is also ordered to do this, and he's complicit in the violence. And at some point during this war, as anti-Semitic laws are enacted across Italy, he becomes victim to the very kinds of bigotry and violence that he was helping to enforce in Ethiopia. I think that these are questions that I think go beyond this period in time, about complicities, about compliances, about the ways that those who are in power eventually become victims of the power that they help to create. And I wanted to explore that through this novel.
Well, The Shadow King is full of wonderful characters, be they female or male, and also lots of internal conflicts as well as battles on the ground. Now, we're coming, unfortunately, to a close of the show, but we always end Encore by asking our guests for some recommendations and cultural picks. What have you chosen for us?
I would like to make everyone aware of a brilliant young artist by the name of Helena Metaferia. She is based in the United States, but she is doing work that I think is slowly making itself known to the rest of the world. She has an exhibit in Boston, but she's producing work that is now in New York City and has made it to Sweden, and I think perhaps even London, and it's slowly moving out. So I just want to alert the world. She is one that I am watching.
Well, we'll end the show with a look at some of Elena Mateferia's art currently on show in Boston. Thank you so much, Maaza Mengiste, for taking the time to talk to Encore and France 24. Your fantastic book, The Shadow King, is being published this month in France, and the latest news bulletin is coming up on France 24 in just a few moments. Stay tuned to all our culture news via our website, france24.com, and of course our social media accounts.
France 24, RFI and Monte Carlo Doualiya wish you a very happy 2022. France Media Monde. Love, watch and listen to the world.